Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and the patch 11.1 has been around on the PTR for quite a bit of time. Based on some of the signs like the calendar, the holidays, and even the splash skin that's been added into the game recently, it looks like Season 2 should be coming out, or at least getting an announcement date very soon. Actually, as soon as by the end of this month. And often enough do I get questions of you guys asking me, what is looking good for Season 2? What classes should you potentially be looking to main and play? What's going to be the best option heading into this brand new update? And as always, when it comes to PTR builds, none of the class tuning is finalized until the very tail end. So none of these classes have been tuned whatsoever, but I still did want to give you guys a little bit of an idea of where we are right now. If you were to take a snapshot in time, just freeze frame PTR for just a second, which classes right now are looking the strongest, at least for PvE content so far. So for today's video, I really wanted to highlight the 5 class specs the players are really starting to pay attention to over on the testing realms as a possible choice for their main going forward, as these are the class specs that are standing out, at least as of this very moment. As always, if you guys want to see more regular updates for the future content update of 11.1, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. First, let's go over the tanks, and when it comes to tank specs, there's actually a lot of decent options, especially heading into the new season. Within raids, tanks really end up changing in value depending what the raid composition needs, unless there's a certain mechanic that a certain tanks deal with the best. Usually something like a Death Knight or a Demon Hunter that are more specialized generally tend to do really well, or like Protection Warrior if you don't really need Fury or Arms, things like that. But for Mythic Plus, it does seem like there's going to be a bit of shifts in meta this time around, as they're removing a lot of the tank busters to make it a little bit easier for tanks to just live and thrive within dungeons. With less tank busters, tanks actually get to play the game, have fun, and play for a more defensive build where they don't need to deal with spiky damage, but rather with gradual damage that they can anticipate and counter with their own use of cooldowns and self-sufficiency. And self-sufficient tanks are looking right now like the most popular pick, at least as of this moment on the PTR. So any tank that can heal themselves really well is the best choice. So far, the Eldraki Vengeance Demon Hunter, yes, it's Eldraki. Every single time I talk to somebody, some people call it Eldrachi, but technically in game it does say Eldraki during one of the Demon Hunter questlines. Anyway, the Eldraki Vengeance Demon Hunter right now does seem like the most self-sufficient choice, just by a little bit. So it does look like there's going to be opportunity for other tanks to do well, but we are seeing a few more Eldraki Vengeance specifically doing some of the more harder keys on PTR. No tuning is final by any measure. That may change up how Eldraki is doing, and there is some damage things that Eldraki does, either with Reaver's Mark or Fury. It's doing a bit more damage than it's supposed to, at least over the last few builds, so it partially what helps him, but survivability is why Eldraki is thriving as of this moment. Not even just damage, the amount of raw healing that Eldraki can do, and self-sufficiency where the healer doesn't necessarily need to manage you nearly as much has been pretty up there. Plus, Demon Hunters have intensely good utility with Sigil of Silence, Sigil of Fear. You can even pick up Sigil of Chain, so you got a lot of ways to crowd control enemies, and you got generally decent damage, great mobility, but that survivability right now is really what's allowing them to do really well. From there, though, I want to pivot to the DPS classes, and right now it feels like War Within as an expansion is one designed for the class of Shaman. I mean, seriously, since the launch of this expansion specifically, Resto, Elemental, and enhancements saw a lot of play. It has been generally one of the top performers all throughout this expansion so far. The World Soul Saga might just be, depending on how Midnight and the Last Titan go through, the World Soul Saga might end up being the Shaman Saga instead, depending how good they keep this class going. But Enhancement Shaman in particular is looking like it's going to be a very solid one in 11.1. The damage that this melee does is still super good. It just is absolutely out of this world, as part of the changes they wanted to do is tone down the Maelstrom generation and spending, rather Maelstrom spending capabilities. They wanted to adjust those a little bit, but they wanted to amp up things like your Lava Lashes, things like your Doom Winds, things like your Crash Lightning, things like your Storm Strikes, your Ice Strikes as well. But like all those things, the basic Maelstrom builders are all amped up by quite a bit. And it's a very slight change, but allows things like Totemic and Stormbringer to be basically equivalent. Shamans are swapping back and forth between the two, and they're doing the same amount of damage. They're just both really, really good. I think this is the first time we're seeing a hero specs that are evenly matched for a spec, and they're so well designed for it, at least in terms of how they play. Now, after all the Totemic changes, how you can move the certain totem, things like that, once those things are finally functional, it actually has them really, really close to each other. And at least as of this moment with the current 11.1 build, Enhanced Shaman is doing incredibly good. If anything, I would at least start prepping a Shaman, because at least I think between Resto, Alien, Enhancement, this class is a fantastic class to even have as an alt in case you ever get bored of playing your main, and it's a great one to pick up at any moment. Shamans so far have been thriving in 11.1 or 11.0 in general, so I think they're likely to retain that same good value going forward. When it comes to the class of the Evoker, as much as they're trying to buff up Devastation and are making some changes to Preservation, it still seems like Augmentation will likely retain their value. And the spec has gone through a number of changes where they wanted to try to make it less good for the next season by changing up the ability of Might so it no longer affects tanks or healers, it will only affect DPS, which will change how AUG performs. More likely, it's how much contribution AUG generates within dungeon content. They did amp up the amount of power up they provide to the other DPS classes to compensate, but they just wanted to make it so they're less synergetic with healers and tanks for the survivability purposes. And even them, they're still doing incredibly good. The 100% upturn with Might, thanks to the tier set of Jackpot, which is actually very, very strong with random proximal appeals that extend the duration of your Might. I mean, it's actually proven to be very, 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 very potent. So the upturn of Might is kind of a huge portion of where they get a lot of their damage output. And with that being 100%, basically, makes them very strong. Plus, the amount of raw damage that they can provide themselves, especially when you combine them with Scale Commander Hero Spec, they're performing quite well as a DPS. They still are going to be a support for the most part, but their own contribution does get a little bit better with some of these adjustments, at least for Mythic Plus dungeons. Plus, what really separates AUG from other DPS classes, and I think it's going to be the case for a very long time, is the raw, unique utility that they bring. Part of the basic combat kit just revolves a lot of knockups, so in Mythic Plus dungeons, that's a free disruption ability. Their ability to provide a Wurnstone to a tank or any other DPS for instant mobility is also kind of massive, and it's something that no other class brings to the game. Their ability to reduce an ally's aggro for free, so a tank can have an easier time holding that aggro while an ally can really pop their cooldowns, not have to rely on any of those issues. That is actually helpful, even though this is something that isn't really experienced as much in retail compared to like classic versions of WoW. Timelessness could still be incredibly, incredibly good. But overall, the spec itself with its buff-based playstyle brings something unique that no other class does, which will likely allow them to retain their popularity going forward. There's a lot in the community that are pretty unhappy with how AUG, or how good AUG has been over the last few seasons that has been added, as ever since they got added in Dragonflight, every single season AUG has been a popular pick at the top end, and that trickles down when it comes to other Mythic Plus dungeons. So a lot of players are wondering if maybe Blizzard could adjust them where, like, come on, they've been literally really, really good since their addition. Is there going to be one season where AUG isn't going to be brought in? Maybe give Devastation time to spread their wings, maybe allow Preservation to shine a little bit brighter. But I think at this point, it's pretty... even though AUG is likely going to be very, very strong heading into Season 2, quite a lot of members in the community are pretty tired of this spec altogether as a DPS option. Another spec that's proven itself to be surprisingly good when it comes to DPS classes is the Beast Mastery Hunter. And mostly comes down to their new talent tree that they've gotten ever since the Big Hunter rework of 11.1. which left them with a lot of fun, new and exciting talents, from their ability to deal AoE damage and spread AoE out a little bit easier, to potentially even increasing the effectiveness of some of their AoE based abilities that don't normally have nearly as much synergy, to even being able to empower their Dire Beasts, any Summon Beasts, to also have additional cleave on top of it anytime you summon them. Plus the Pack Leader rework, which has allowed them to really redefine Pack Leader with a much more of a flavorful playstyle, summoning Wyvern, the Boar, or the Bear, very similar to Rexar, how you would summon all of his companions as the original, I would even say, survival hunter from way back in the day. But it synergizes super well into the Beast Master playstyle, summoning all of these additional beasts, some of which, like the Bear, considered a Dire Beast, so it gains all the benefits of Dire Beast. It's just super, super good, very strong overall. And overall, damage-wise, numerically, Beast Mastery has been looking very solid in both raid testing and Mythic Plus testing. To be mentioned here, however, is they haven't done any final tuning for classes, so there's a good chance that Beast Mastery possibly is just overblown a bit, and maybe they'll do an adjustment in the future, but so far, it's looking promising. So if you are looking for a very, very strong range class to play in the future, Beastmaster would be one of the most approachable ones, and with how they're doing right now on the PTR, could potentially mean that there might be a very solid pick, either as a main or potentially as a fun alt to pick up throughout the season. Now, when it comes to healers, there are currently a lot of bugs present in the patch 11.1, but healers are more or less in a very similar boat as tanks, where with tanks, there seems to be a lot of technically possibly really good options. With healers, there's a lot of good options on paper. That being said, the bugs are causing certain healers, at least over these past few weeks, to do a lot less healing than intended, but on paper, all of them look very, very strong. Like, if you can assume that all these bugs, specific bugs that we know of, are going to be fixed, and certain talent interactions that aren't working will be working, then we can assume that a lot of these healers are going to be a lot closer and a lot more competitive to each other, hopefully this season than the previous season. However, because of these bugs, there's only 2 healers that really stand out as of this moment, and one of those healers that's a standout is a Mistweaver Monk, which has gotten a great number of changes that allows it to have a little bit more Healy damage output as the reward Jade Empowerment, instead of it being mostly an AoE ability with some single target potential. It's not primarily a big single target ability with some AoE potential, allowing them to convert their damage into healing, which is part of this Fist Weaver Mistweaving gameplay, where the more damage you do to enemies, the more healing you're able to provide to allies, allowing you to hit harder to heal harder, which actually works out really well in content like Mythic Plus in particular, allowing you to deal some of the most damage out of all the healers in the game, up to like 1 million guaranteed constant damage, which converts it to fantastic healing to everybody else in your party. But it also synergizes really well with either the Master of the Harmony playstyle or Counter the Celestials. So these challenge changes have allowed the spec to do pretty well, at least as of this moment, and potentially we may be seeing a recreation of Dragonflight Season 3, where technically all healers were really good, but Mistweaver ended up standing out just slightly ahead of everybody else. And with the tank changes they've done recently with less tank busters, Mistweavers are looking very solid, as now the healing playstyle is going to be more about throughput rather than your allies blowing up randomly and having to prevent that damage, which monks are not great at preventing it, but they're great at reversing that damage after the allies' Hellbar takes the full brunt of it. However, there is always an opportunity for Disc Priest to shine as well, as there are certain dungeons like the Priory, which requires you to have a priest. Then there was for a little bit of time, Mechagon Dungeon, where players were able to take control of the squirrels for a bit. It looked like Disc Priest was going to be the front runner for a little bit, but they've recently, as of this build, actually have changed it so you no longer can do mind control tech as effectively. So maybe there's an opportunity for Mistweavers and Disc Priests to duel each other for that #1 spot. But right now, when it comes to healers, all the best we can do is talk about the hypotheticals, as on paper, all of them should be very solid in this type of a healing environment, especially when it comes to Mythic Plus, and potentially even heading into this raid tier. But if you did have to point one healer out apart from the crowd, I would say a lot of players are looking at Mistweaver very favorably right now, at least as of this very moment within the PTR builds. I will mention this again, don't take this video as gospel as to which classes you should be prepping for Season 2. PTR is by no means final, and none of the changes have been finalized. There's still going to be a lot more adjustments as we go on over these next few weeks, but if you were to take a snapshot in this current moment on 11.1, these are the class specs that a lot of players are starting to notice and are starting to pay attention to, which is probably the best way that I could frame it. As always though, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy this update. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community if you want to keep up with all the regular 11.1 updates. We post there pretty regularly. The best place to reach me out directly as well. Also, let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.